but they had this opening scene where they're, first year Harvard Law School, and you had that professor, and he talks about, he's like, I'm not going to teach you the law. You have to learn the law on your own.
Hey everyone, I'm so glad to be here with you today. Joining me is Michael Gelfound. He is the owner of Gelfound Law. He really helps you maximize your academic potential in law school. It helps you succeed. It's really geared towards first year students, but really it's a study method that can work for anyone. And of course, I'm Sydney, the owner and founder of Montgomery Admissions Consulting, a graduate of Princeton and Harvard Law School. I combine my experiences as the daughter of a Jamaican immigrant and military father with my professional development training through the University of California, Irvine, and the Independent Educational Consultants Association to provide personalized college counseling and law school admissions advice. As the first lawyer in my family, I am passionate about helping students break down generational barriers to law school, helping them believe in themselves and their dreams, feel supported, and create communities for life. I'm so glad to be here with you today. Thanks, Michael, for joining us.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me, Sydney.
Awesome. So I know I gave a little bit of a background, but why don't you just go and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and more importantly, why you do what you do?
Sure. So I am a lawyer. I'm a practicing attorney. I'm in my 7th year of practice in a firm in Los Angeles. I went to Southwestern Law School, and before that, I went to UC Santa Barbara. I was a business economics major with accounting. I actually did accounting and I became a CPA before I even went to law school. Went back to law school at 28, so I was a little bit older. And I graduated in 3 years and got a job and
Wow.
worked in litigation and been there since. Now, this kind of just started kind of randomly. How I got into this was I first was working, and when I was talking with an associate that I was at my firm, they told me that they had somebody that was starting law school and if I could give advice to them. And the reason why they asked me that is because they knew I did so well, and that I had a system to really do well in law school that I knew personally, but other people didn't. So I thought, well, okay, let's see if I can help this person do well. So I worked with this person and they did exceptionally well and getting A's and even A pluses. And I started to realize that law school really doesn't teach students the right way to learn the law. There's a lot of good things about the Socratic method and what they're trying to do, but it's actually not helpful for many students because they don't help you identify what the elements are of certain issues and build that foundational knowledge. So I saw a real opening here to help many students who are confused, who are not getting the grades that they think they should be getting. And it has nothing to do with them not knowing the material or not being able to compete or, the imposter syndrome and all that stuff. It's really because they just don't know what to do. And that's why I have a method that lays out a map, provides the map and guides them and shows them exactly what they need to do to not only do well, but do exceptionally well.
Okay, that makes sense. That's amazing. And so how long have you been doing this?
So the first person I took on was 3 years ago. That was kind of the test phase. And then after that, once it worked, I started expanding out and then helping people out in mainly Southern California. And I took on a few students a couple years ago and they were all successful. And then just this year alone, I started expanding nationally. And now I've been reaching
Amazing.
different schools. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, Michael, what would you say are some of the struggles and challenges that you see students face in law school, especially in that first year?
The biggest problem that most law school students face is not knowing what to do. So they're thrown with all this information. Like the professors will tell them, you got to brief cases, you got to read these cases, understand the cases, and get ready for class. And that's what their main focus is. And if you spend all your energy on that, there's a couple of things wrong with that. Number one is you don't really learn the law that way. It's hard to recreate the law from just studying a case and working
Yeah.
backwards. That's a big problem. And a lot of students get confused about how to put their outlines together. And they also don't understand like the big picture of the law. And then once they get to the end of the semester and they've worked through some of the issues and started putting something together, now they have to take a hypothetical exam and test their mastery of this course, which they have no practice on doing. And so really it's a time constraint. They just don't have time to master the law, and they're just doing a lot of things that they shouldn't be doing and
Okay.
focusing their energy in places that they shouldn't be focusing. And I think that's the biggest problem, is just not having a clear guide on what to do during your first year of law school.
And now you mentioned that, students think that they have to kind of memorize the cases. Is that something that's coming from the law schools? Like they're telling them how to memorize, or they're telling them that they need to memorize, or is it coming from like forums, or where are they getting these ideas that are sometimes, incorrect about how they need to go about studying for law school?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if some professors are saying memorize the cases. I don't know if they're saying specifically that, but they do emphasize the cases on their and how important they are. And it's really not about, as you know, memorizing cases. It's about really extracting the rules from those cases and building an
Mhm.
outline. And I think there's too much focus on the cases. Now, the way you should learn is you should learn the elements and the foundation of the law, and the case is an interpretation of one narrow issue or an example of a
Yeah.
particular issue. But in law school, it's actually backwards. So you're starting at the case, and then you're supposed to like reverse engineer and figure out, okay, well, what element is this analyzing, and what sub element does this fall into? And you're supposed to work backwards. And if you memorize the cases or focus on the cases, you're missing the big picture. You're missing how the law actually works. And I think looking at it from a big picture standpoint is where most students fail to see how the law just works at the big picture. They're so focused on the case and understanding a particular case that they miss everything else.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So, one, it's like a two-part question. What can students do then so that they are more successful, so that they avoid those kind of like pitfalls and traps? But also, what can schools do to help guide students in the right way that they can see the big picture, that they don't get lost in, oh, this case, this case, this case, but they can kind of put together the elements of the law?
Yeah, so to answer your first part, students, what they should be doing is really going straight to the outline and figuring out what the law is, how the law works. I would do that before even going to a case. If you understand an outline, you're going to understand how the case works. So, in when I'm in practice and I come to an issue that I don't know, I don't go search cases to figure out that issue. I first go to some kind of publication like a treatise or
Okay.
something that will help me understand what I'm trying to figure out, and then there they will identify a case that's going to be helpful. And then once you narrow it down to a particular issue, then you can focus on a case. So I would, instead of focusing on the case, focus on the black letter law, and then go to the case after you understand the law. It'll make the case will make much more sense after that. As far as law school goes, I would say they should change the way they teach and not teach from just case law as a starting point, but to really teach the black letter law, teach the elements, and then use the case to reinforce that particular element, and use the case as an interpretation of a very narrow issue to show an example of and to show how the case law works in that regard. Cases are important and you need to learn how to
Right.
read lawyer, but I don't think that's a starting point. And I think that's where a lot of law students go, get confused, and they end up not learning the material they should be learning because they're so focused on the case. And once you're a lawyer and you have to deal with cases, you'll learn how to read cases and get better at that. And you should read cases in law school, but that should never be the starting point. And I think students should not start there. And I think professors should not start there as well when they teach it.
That makes so much sense. I remember the class that I struggled with the most was property. But I didn't think that I struggled with property the most. Um,
Yeah.
I didn't realize I struggled with property until exam time. But and I love my property professor. But we would do like a really deep dive into certain cases. Like we didn't have a lot of reading, so I was like, this is great.
Yeah.
You just have to know those cases so well because he'd only assign like two or three, and then we'd like do a deep dive of it. But then I realized at the end of the semester, I had no idea like how any of it related to each other. I understood how those specific cases worked, but when it came to a fact pattern or an issue spotter, and especially when it came to the bar exam, I was like, I do not have a working understanding of property law.
Right. And that's the problem I think most students have, is that they don't apply the law. They're just trying to take a case to learn the law, which is very hard to do. And even if they're able to do that to some degree of certainty, it's harder then to put it all together. And like you said, like how does one connect to another? And you read one case and you read another case and you're like, okay, how does this case connect to this case? And you
Right.
don't see the big picture. And so I help students first identify the big picture, and then the cases make much more sense. And then once you see how the cases work, you're like, oh, okay, this case is an example of this element, or is talking about this this particular issue. And when you're learning, that's important, because if you're trying to start at the case that you probably never read a case before law school, and then working backwards, it's extremely hard to do.
Yeah, and that's actually a perfect segue. Can you talk to me a little bit more about your study program, what you do, how it works, when you
Yeah.
start
So
even?
Yeah, so it's a semester-long program, and I generally start in the first few months of the semester. Typically, well, I do there's first semester, second semester. Students I go with the first semester are students that are usually ready to get A's out of the gate and learn how to do this. The second semester, usually people didn't do as well as they wanted to, so they come to me now to get better grades or get straight A's. But my program is basically showing you how to do law school in a very efficient and productive manner. It's not ignoring what you're doing in class, but it's not focusing on that either. What you're being focused on, what you focus on is learning the law first, but doing it in a way that you're going to be able to memorize all the elements, but also see the big picture. And that's the first part of the program, is to get you to understand how the law works and to be able to read it enough in your outlines, and how to put together your outlines that are 100% correct, and how to read them enough where you know that this is the law. And then we work on practice exams the second half, because that's really where you learn. It's a practice
Yeah.
exam. You don't learn. In fact, there's an interesting statistic that there's a pyramid of retention where people that go to a lecture, for example, only retain about 5% of what they hear. People that read something retain about 10% of what they hear. And then group discussion, I think, is up to 50%. Now, when you do practice exams, you retain up to 75% of that
Wow.
subject. And then teaching is like 90%. So once you teach a subject, now you really, understand that subject. So most students, where they go wrong is they're doing their outlines, they're reading, they're listening to lectures. They're not retaining most of that stuff anyways. And then at the end of the semester, you got to put together a hypothetical exam and issue spot. You're not going to be ready for that unless you practice that. So I get them ready to practice that. I get them to the point where they are issue spotting, they are writing good analysis, they're identifying all the rules that are important and pertinent, and how to really outline the exam in a way that's going to stick out, because in law school, it's all graded, it's all curved. And so only the top students get the top grades. It's not like everybody get A's. So
Right.
competing with
I
everybody.
wish.
Yeah, right. And maybe in undergrad, it was maybe more like that. But in law school, it's like, there might be one A plus, there might be 3 or 4 A's and a couple A minuses, and the remainder get B pluses, B minuses. And you're competing against everybody else. So you want to make sure that your exam looks better than everybody else. And by doing that is identifying more issues and really analyzing those issues more deeply.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I know there's some people that are listening who are maybe not fully with us because they're getting lost in some of this jargon. So I was wondering if we could break down some of that. I know that we've talked about outlines a lot, we've said issue spotter, we've said rule. Maybe you could talk about those 3 words, just like, real basic, what that means for people that are listening who might not know.
Sure, of course. So outlining is really like, think about it as just like putting the course into writing, like how you would like outline the most important parts of the course. So you're basically, what your outline consists of, it consists of all the elements of what you're learning. So I like to think of it kind of like chemistry, where every different area of the law has certain elements that have to come together to have an action. And
Mhm.
you have to understand how those elements are, what those elements are, and then what are like the sub issues and sub elements, and what are the rules and everything. So basically the outline is really the rule of law. It's really how the law works, and it's labeled in a way where you can see, okay, you have to have this and this and this to have this law, like this contract. You have to have 1, 2, and 3 to have a contract. Or
Right.
let's say it's a criminal law and there's a homicide action. You have to have this, this, and this to establish homicide. So what
Kind of
it's
like
doing
a
is giving—
glorified study guide.
yeah, it is. And it is the study guide. I mean, that's what it is. And so it helps you. And then you put in the cases, but the cases are really just kind of examples of, like, a case might be an example of a part of a contract formation. So it's just a small example, but really you're starting up here at the high level of what a contract is. And it's giving you this philosophical definition and the elements, and then you work your way down to the case. And when you understand the law that way, everything else makes more sense, like reading the cases. Now, what you're supposed to do is start with the cases and create your own outline. And that's very hard to do working backwards. So what I do is I recommend that we create this study guide and give a big picture of the classes. And that's your outline. That's your outline of the course. As far as the issue spotting goes, to define that, is when you're taking an exam, what they do is, like I said, you have some elements, let's say contracts, you have some elements, you might have an issue on whether or not a certain element is satisfied. And that would be an issue that has to be resolved on the exam. And the exam is all just many issues. There's like 40 or 50 issues on all different areas of the law that,
Yeah.
there's different elements that are in contention, and you have to identify, you have to figure out and give an analysis on why that element is either satisfied or not satisfied. And there's many, many elements that you do that for. So the issue spotting is identifying what issues, what elements are at issue, what you would have to talk about, because some of them aren't, some of them are, and it's based upon your fact pattern. Your fact pattern will let you know based on the facts whether that fits into the rules or not. And usually the fact pattern creates some kind of gray area. So that's why you got a lot to talk about, and you get to go back
Right.
to the issues.
Right. Right. And then just the rule, just that kind of last
Oh
one.
yeah, the rule. So the rule is, that's just your definition of what the law is. So like, that's what the elements are. So like, if you have, like, let's say a contract, you have to have rules of contract, like what makes up a contract. And there's certain rules, like kind of like anything, like the law of physics or the law of economics or whatever. There's certain rules that just have to occur. So like, you have to have certain elements, and those are the rules. Like they're, like for example, contract, you would have to have consideration. That would be a rule, and there's a rule what consideration means, and they define what consideration is. That's like a value in exchange, like a bargain for exchange. And then there's another element, mutual assent, and then there's rules on what that means. So rules is really just the meaning of those elements.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think you summed that up perfectly. I have to say, I commend you for doing this work, because listening to this conversation is definitely giving me some PTSD from law school exams. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, and you usually get that one exam at the end of the semester, which it's really, that's it, 100% of your grade. And not only that, you're spending a lot of money to go to law school. So there's that factor where a lot of law schools now are over six figures. And if you don't have if you don't have student, if you don't have like a scholarship or something like that, it could be very hard to take on that kind of debt. And you're dealing with really smart people. Everybody in law school is smart. You don't get to law school unless you have some level of intelligence. And now you're dealing with, so like, everybody's smart. That's why this could work on anybody, because if you got to law school, you're smart enough to get an A in law school. That's the way I look at it. And the problem is you're competing with really smart people. So now not only are you in the highest level of education really in this field, but now you're competing with really smart people. And then in the backdrop, you have this huge financial burden that you're always thinking about. So there's a lot of pressure, a lot of stress.
There's a lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure. And even if you're doing really well, it's still a lot of pressure. I felt a tremendous pressure. Like you said, PTSD. I used to have that too all the time. So it's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah, yeah, no, but I think that's why what you do is so valuable. It's so important to have someone like you that can kind of take some of the pressure off, or at least make you feel like you're not kind of shooting in the dark.
Yes.
You provide kind of a roadmap for them so that they can be the best that they can be, that they can use that natural intelligence and apply it in a way that they need to. Because I feel like so often, even with law school admissions, which is where I focus on, it's about knowing what the path is. It's not necessarily, oh, you're not, I don't make you a better applicant. I just help you through the process, because I know this is what works, this is what doesn't work, this is what they're looking for, this is the timing, this is the next step. And so I feel like sometimes that's all you need, is just someone to show you a roadmap of, this is the very next step that you need to take.
Yeah, and I think with law school especially, as you know, they don't really teach you the law. In fact, there's this
They don't.
great movie. I don't know if you saw this. This is before my time, even, called The Paper Chase, which is first
Yes,
year at
I
Harvard
have
Law School.
seen The Paper Chase.
Excellent movie.
It's required. How do you go to Harvard Law School and you haven't seen The Paper Chase?
Yeah, I know. I
Really
watched
why
it.
I watched it.
Yeah, it's great. But they have this opening scene where they're, first year Harvard Law School, and you had that professor, and he talks about, he's like, I'm not going to teach you the law. You have to learn the law on your own. I'm going to just go, we're going to do Socratic method. We're going to do questioning and answering, and we're going to train you to act and think like a lawyer. And that's a common thing that professors say. We're going to teach you to think and act like a lawyer. And true, when you have to think on your feet. There is Socratic method that you would use in real life, but my philosophy is learn the law, and then you can act and think like a lawyer when you're a lawyer. You'll have plenty of time to learn how to do that and develop that and get better at that stage. There's no point in trying to build that. And I use the analogy of like trying to build a bigger engine, because, back 100 years ago when they were doing the first flight, what they were trying to do is they were so focused on building the biggest engine possible, but what they forgot to look at was aerodynamics. And a lot of the early flights just couldn't fly because they didn't
They're too
satisfy
heavy.
the law of aerodynamics. The Wright brothers, who were bicycle shop owners, really didn't know much about engines. They built something that was aerodynamic. And so they didn't even focus really on the engine. They built aerodynamic, and they were able to fly and actually do the first flight. And then later you build the engine. So my analogy is first learn the law of aerodynamics, learn the law, like the black letter law, the foundation. And then the Socratic method is like the engine. Okay, once you learn the law, now you can learn how to do the Socratic method and build upon that and become a really good lawyer. But first, learn the law before you do that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So in all of this, and kind of like really honing in on what's important and what you want for the law, what are your favorite areas of the law? Or like, what was your favorite part in law school or favorite class that you had?
Well, so my favorite area was the fun classes like criminal law and criminal procedure and constitutional law, which I do none of that in practice. But I love learning about that just because, that's kind of like when you're a kid and you watch lawyer movies and you see like it's usually like some kind of like homicide or some kind of crazy thing, and reading about those cases are very fun. Constitutional law was always a great course because just seems more um, it just seems more prevalent in today in our lives and everything, especially now. It's always kind of changing. um, but I was kind of a nerd where I just liked learning about the law, like all areas, even like civil procedure or contracts. As dry as those courses may be, I found a lot of
Yes,
satisfaction in just
very
learning.
dry.
Yeah, yes, they are. I mean, but and they weren't my favorite. Like criminal law was my favorite, and that kind of stuff, constitutional law. But I still am kind of the nerd in a way where I just like learning about the law and just something about the law and how it works and how things in life, it touches all areas of life. Every aspect of life is touched by the law. So
Yeah.
like you buy something and you look at the terms and conditions, which no one reads, and you click yes, you're signing something that you have no idea what you're reading, but that's a contract. And there's like, it's everywhere in everything, right? And there's like,
Yeah.
negligence, all kinds of aspects of the law. So understanding how that works to me was very fascinating and interesting. So I like, for me, law school was a love-hate relationship. I love learning about the law. I love going to classes and experiencing that. I hated the finals. It was
Yeah.
stressful.
I
Uh,
mean, who likes the finals, really?
yeah, it was so much pressure and stress that at that point I hated life and hated the law. But once you get past all that, then it's very fascinating and interesting, and it's fun. The classes and the semester, although it's stressful, it's fun. Yeah, it's great up until the point where you take the finals, and then that's why I like to help students get past the finals, because once they start doing well, then they can enjoy the law more
Yeah.
instead of stressing out about, oh, I need to make a grade, or I don't really understand this. As long as they get a decent grade, then they're like, okay, I think I understand some of it, and then I can continue down my path and learn more.
So you really help them keep or retain the love of the law.
Yeah, I mean, if it's yeah, right. So like, I guess indirectly, right? So if like if you do well in it, you're going to want to continue to do it. But if you don't do well in it, then you might second guess yourself and say, maybe this isn't for me. Um, I mean, people have various reasons why they want to become a lawyer. Um,
Yeah.
some people really just want to help other people, don't care about the money, and that's great. Some people want to be in a big law firm, and that's where they're headed, and they need to get grades to get there. So there's different reasons why they want to be a lawyer. I would always say personally, follow your passion. Don't
Yeah.
just do it to work in a big firm. I know plenty of people in a big firm right now that,
So do
and
I.
yeah, and that's another discussion for another day. But yeah, I would just say follow your passion in that regard. I mean,
Yeah.
figure out why you want to be a lawyer, why you want to go to law school, and use that as your motivation. Like, what are you really trying to accomplish? And then if you do that, you're going to love the law and continue to stick with it.
I love that. I love that. It's so in line with everything that I say. I mean, I'm really trying to get my students to figure out, like, what is your why law? What is motivating you? You didn't get here by accident. Like, there's something inside of you that brought you to law school. So I love that you are encouraging students to find their passion, follow their passion, not just chase the money. I really love that the values are really aligned there. Before I ask you where students can contact you or find more information, I just want to ask if there's anything else that you feel like it's so important to share with students, or something that you wish you knew before you went to law school, just any kind of final words.
I think I was pretty fortunate to know what to expect in law school. I have a family of lawyers, so for me, I kind of knew what to expect. I knew it wasn't all glamorous and it was going to be like trial rooms every day and stuff like that. I would say for students that have no idea what to expect, don't just go to law school because that's what your parents tell you to do, or you have no
Mhm.
idea. Like, really think about it, because and as fun as being a lawyer is, and I do some cool stuff. I go to court. I do litigation. So I'm in court. I'm doing depositions and stuff like that, which I personally like. But it's not every day, and most of the time, it's a bunch of work that I don't like to do. So it can be very rewarding, but at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that's not fun, and it's a lot of hard work. And
Yeah.
so I think a lot of colleagues that I had and people, they go to law school and they think they have this like kind of like idea of what it could be, and it's really not like that. And so you really want to figure out what it is that you want to accomplish, and it goes back to your why. Why are you doing what you're doing? And I always ask that question first because I want to understand why you're going to law school. Some people say, well, something happened to me when I was a kid, and I wish I knew a lawyer then, and I want to fight back for something like that. And then you're just like, okay, that's a good reason. Or there's something that there's a certain area of law they want to help people out in. Like, let's
Mhm.
say they're an immigrant and they're like, I need to go to immigration law. I need to help people get through the process. So they have a real reason why they want to do that. But if you don't have a real reason and you're just going through the motion, I would say think really hard about going to law school because it's a ton of work.
Yeah.
Potentially it's going to be a lot of debt. And the problem is, yes, money is important and you can get paid a lot, but not everybody's getting those high paying jobs. And if you do get a high paying job, you're likely in a big law firm and you're probably going to hate it. So, you just have to really think about what you want. And maybe that's what you want. You want to be in a big law firm, and that's great if that's what you want. But yeah, for me, I don't know if there was anything that I didn't really know. I kind of knew what to expect, and this all has been expected for me. But looking back on it, I would say always follow your passion. And the other thing too is I would say network more. That's one thing I didn't do as much as a lawyer, is to network and to really
Yeah.
build a connection. And that's one thing that I help my students do more so. And that's one thing that I didn't do. So that's something that I wish I did more of.
Yeah. Now, I know I said that was the last question, but this reminded me, what do you say to students? Because I get this often, who are like, well, I know I want to go to law school. I've always wanted to go to law school, but I'm going to figure out what kind of law, or I'm going to figure out, what I want to do in law school in law school. What do you kind of say to those students?
I mean, it's okay if you really want to go to law school, to not know where you're going to end up. And I can tell you from experience, you can end up in a path you had no idea you would end up in. Like, for example, I was a CPA before law school, so I knew taxes before I even stepped into law school. I thought I was for sure going to do taxes, 100%. And I was going down that path, and I was kind of closed-minded in that regard. And then
Hmm.
things didn't work out that way, and I ended up going into litigation, which I absolutely love, and I'm working at a firm with great people. So I didn't know where I was going, but I ended up in a good place. But I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. So that for me was like, all right, I know I want to be a lawyer. I can figure out the details. I would say keep an open mind, like as far as what you want to be. You don't have to know exactly where you want to go, but I think it is important to do very well, because wherever you do want to go, you want doors to be open, not closed. And
Yeah.
so if you do well, you'll have options. And the better you do, the more options you'll have. And you try different things, like try an internship with somebody or try an externship with somebody. Meet different people, network with different people, see what you like. It's okay to figure out what you want to do. But I would say if you don't know if you want to be a lawyer, that's not okay. You want to make sure you want to be a lawyer first, and then you can kind of figure out where you want to go. I don't think you have to figure that out immediately. I think by taking classes and talking to people and doing externships, you'll start to figure that out as you go.
No, I love that. I think that's exactly right. So Michael, where can students find you if they want to work with you? How do they do that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's gelfoundlaw.com. If you go on my website, there's a video I post. It's really an introduction video, and it talks about some important things about law school and some general guidance. And then you can just sign up for a call with me, and I'll do a call, and it's a free call, and we talk about your study method. What I really do is I review what they're doing in law school and seeing if they're on track, and if it sounds like something that I can help them with. Sometimes people are doing really good, and so great, keep doing what you're doing. Other times I can tell, like, okay, if you really want to get to these grades, this is what you got to do. And we talk about the strategy and get clarity on your study method. But if you go to my website, that's where you can link up with me and sign up for a call with me.
Should they contact you before they start law school, or should they wait until they've gotten into law school into them before they contact you?
Yeah, I would wait till they start the law school because, I mean, I'm really focused on helping law students in law school. And we would get the program starts with them being in law school. So if they wanted like general advice or something, that's where you would come in and they would talk with you. But for me, it's like they're already in law school, they're about to start. And really, I wait till they start law school. There's no need to talk with them before because it's really geared towards the classes they're in right now and what they're doing right now. I do have a Facebook group. It's called Law School Accelerator, which I do post stuff, and that could be more of a pre-law thing. So if you're thinking about law school or you want some general guidance before you get to law school, you can check out that page. I can add you to that page, and you can get some information. But really, the program is you're ready to go. You're in law school, and here we go. Let's do some real work.
And is that like week one, or like should they wait till like maybe week 5?
Yeah, week one might be a little bit early. I think the best week is between week 2 and week 5. Um,
Perfect.
is the best. If it's you can even go up to about week 7 or 8. After that, it's going to be kind of too hard to work with you. Of course, if you want to, I do have a program that's accelerated that's meant for just doing practice exams. So if you want to do just practice exams, we can do that the second half of the semester. But
Okay.
the way my program works best now, I mean, you could sign up halfway through and I could still get you there, but it's going to work best if you sign up between weeks 2 and 5 because it's really a semester long program and you really want to get started on like the outlines and starting to get those in place very early on.
Amazing, amazing. Well, Michael, this has been really informative. I have learned a lot. I've been reminded of a lot of things. I'm really glad that you're a resource for students. I'm really glad that you're doing this work, that you're helping students be successful, get those grades so they can have all those open doors in whatever area of law that they want to go into. So I just thank you so much for being here and for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you for having me.
Awesome. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.